Welcome to the Sacred Geometry of Consciousness. For more than 33 years, your show hosts, Gregory and Gail Hogue, have been internationally known leaders in creating sacred geometric tools for expanding loving consciousness and well-being. Listen in now as they share practical applications of sacred geometry in everyday life.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. This is step 10 in how Spirit connects with us. And today we're going to be talking about at night while the ego sleeps and dreaming occurs. This is a time when higher self comes into our awareness through our subconscious when the guards are down. And there are certainly many different books and understandings about how to interpret dreams, but I think one of the main things to really be aware of is that in your dream, no matter which character, the good guy, the bad guy, whatever, it's all different aspects of you that Spirit is working with to help you understand how to interpret more of what's going on in your life through that time of the day, the nighttime. It's amazing when you think about it. It's like over a third of our life is spent in a dream state or in a nighttime sleeping mode. So it's really valuable to start looking at ways that we can maximize and utilize that time of our life and use it in a way that can help us unfold more into who we are.
One thing that's interesting about sleep time and dream time is that this is a time for our physical body to regenerate. So we're in a regenerative mode so that we can become rested, we can work with whatever it is that mind, body, and spirit can be served with. And it's interesting when we look at it from that perspective that part of that regenerative process is connecting with the higher self, with the higher aspects of who we are, with our guides, so that we can move to another level. We can clear ourselves, we can heal ourselves, we can take our next steps through that dream state. That's actually part of the consciousness that wants to be acknowledged. There's so much there. During our waking time, it's not only that our ego may be, kind of like holding certain important things at bay, it's also the fact that there's so much stimulation, so much is going on around us in our awareness, and our brains are doing the best that they can to sort through that. And it's not actually just the events, the experiences that occur, it is the perception of those experiences. How do we respond to them? What are the messages? What are we learning from those experiences? What postures are we taking? And when we're in a quiet mode, a rest mode, that's a reflective time. It is the perfect slowdown time for those messages to be revealed, for our consciousness to awaken to the deeper levels. The brain is functioning in a different mode. And so when the brain is slower, when it's not getting all this other physical stimulus, then that's the opportunity for so much to happen. So that's why we are suggesting that part of our time during sleep is a provocative time to connect, to learn more, to be able to acclimate ourselves to what's going on, to get those messages, and actually to build pathways to support the evolution of our lives.
And for me, it was a very, very powerful experience that happened over 46 years ago now, where the dream state opened up in an entirely new way through a couple of incidents that happened during that summer. This was a time when I was in a meditation group with a guru, and we were working on meditating. And what happened was, one of my fellow meditators said, "You know, have you ever had that experience at night where before you wake up, you start falling, and all of a sudden you hit with a thud and you kind of wake up really kind of rudely?" And he said, "You know, if you meditate, when you start falling, you don't hit." And I went, "Wow, that's pretty interesting." And now I want to digress a little bit before I finish this story, and that's to another story that happened with Gail and I and a neighbor a number of years later. Our neighbor had a young daughter who was about a year and a half old, a really sweet little girl. And she was wonderful all the time, except when she put her down for a nap, when she woke up, she would always wake up just screaming, unhappy, crying, really upset. And we didn't have any understanding what was going on. This was something that was really starting to bother her. And then her older daughter, who was about 16 at that time, she was a beautiful nature spirit and was able to see auras and see energies. So she was a very interesting young girl to be around. Well, one day she was sitting next to her crib when she was napping, and she saw her sister come back into her body from astro projecting. And what had happened, which was a habit that her mother got into, was when her daughter fell asleep, she would fall asleep on her stomach. And it always bothered her mother that she thought, oh, she was not going to be able to breathe well on her stomach, so she would turn her over onto her back. Well, she would do this during the nap, flip her daughter over, and what her sister saw was that when she was coming back into her body, that it had been flipped over and she came in already facing down. So she came into her body and her body had been reversed when she came into it, and then woke up in a kind of mixed state energy wise. And so that was why she started freaking out and crying so much. And so her mother then started leaving her daughter on her stomach while she slept. And then when she went out and astral projected and came back into her body, she didn't have this crying fit when she woke up. So, years later, I hear this story and go, oh my God, this is really proof that we do astral project at night. And this is another aspect that's kind of tacked on to what goes on at night when we loosen up those ties to our body. There's a great deal of learning that goes on, because we can literally travel the world, travel the dimensions, learn all kinds of things, and bring it back into our awareness. Now, I'm going to get back to my original story, because this story about hitting with a thud, falling when you're dreaming, is really us coming back into our body from astral projecting. So my friend said, and at that time I didn't really understand what was going on. I simply knew I was falling and then would hit with a thud when I come back into my body and wake up. So he told me to meditate, and that very next night I had one of those dreams. I thought it was a dream, but I was coming back into my body. I was experiencing falling, so I started meditating. And what happened was I took off and I started flying. I literally started flying and moving in through the cosmos, and it was an incredible experience. And then what was even more incredible was the following night, I was having a scary dream. It was a dream where there were bad guys chasing me, and they were chasing me on a train. And so I was running from one car to another car, breaking through the doors at the end, and they were running after me. And so I was running through this train and really frightened when, for some reason, I remembered the dream I had had the night before when I was falling, and I meditated. And so I thought, what would happen now if I meditated? So that's what I did. I sat down on that train, crossed my legs, got into a meditative position, and I started meditating. The train disappeared, the bad guys disappeared, and it was the last scary negative dream I've ever had in my life. And the interesting thing in all of this for me is that I can bring awareness into my dream state. I can bring consciousness into my dream state. And just like the story of the emperor who falls asleep and dreams that he's a butterfly, and then in his waking state, he wonders, is he a butterfly dreaming that he's a man, or a man at night dreaming that he's a butterfly? And so it really started shifting the way I started working with my consciousness in my daily waking life as well, because it was as malleable during the day, it seemed, as at night. And in my meditative, more conscious perception, I was able to shift my dreams at night. I was finding I could shift my dreams during the day, or my day experience. And, this is something that Gail and I have talked about before with daydreaming. It's really, what are some of the differences, between night dreaming, daydreaming, and how we interact with them and so forth.
So that begs the question, the experience of sleeping and waking consciousness is not as if there is one door that closes and the other door opens. It's a pathway. And when our brains move into different modes, different levels of consciousness, then we're able to access so much more. And so if we just were to look at everything not as compartments, but instead as a flow between awakeness and a flow between sleep, a flow between dreams, in that level where the unconscious is performing its work, and the time when we're more in the conscious awake state. It's a flow. All of it is actually opened to us. And when we meditate, we become aware of how we can reach into these different qualities of consciousness. They're all part of who we are. And so it's really valuable to be able to take that flow, whether we recall our dreams or not, is not necessarily the point, because when we awaken from dreams, when we get up in the morning, we have a certain feeling. And so I may not have recall of the actual dreams, but I have a feeling. I have something that's already coloring my experience of where I am in the moment of awakeness. And one of the things that I like to do is in the morning, I like to begin my day in meditation, because that's a beautiful flow from that space of connection and consciousness into a continuity with meditation. And when I start my meditation in the morning, I might even reflect on what feels good to me, or what it is that I want to be contacting my consciousness with, how I want to color my experience for the day, what thoughts, what energies, what intentions I want to build, and to work with that and then go into the higher states of consciousness, those connections with soul, with spirit. And that way, there is like a very natural pathway between those levels of superconsciousness and consciousness. So when we daydream, we slow down the brain, we slow down our breathing sometimes. It's very valuable to actually recognize the connection through the heart and come back. Maybe put your hands on your heart. If you have any of our tools and you're working with a heart companion, put your hand there and really work with the energy and allow yourself to come into that center. And daydreams are ways of building pathways, just like night dreams are ways of building pathways. We're recognizing certain things. We're looking at what wants to speak through us, what wants to come to recognition, to realization. And so daydreaming gives us the ability to go from that superconscious state, that rest and dream state, into building what we would like to create. And daydreams are wonderful. They can be really fun. They can be very entertaining. They can help us to come to greater clarity and actually instruct our lives on what we want to create. So if there's something going on in your life and you want to work with it, sometimes we are schooled in understanding how to work with visions, but it's not just the visual, it's all of the different energies. It's connecting on the higher levels. It's moving into the heart space. It's building the vibrational field so that we can take our next steps. We can build the energetic pathways. Many years ago, as an artist, what I was consciously doing with my artwork was constructing energetic fields that were visual fields, that were something that a person could stand in front of and go into a contemplative space and be able to walk further into who they are, what they want to create in their life, to have more of those resources. And we're building those fields for ourselves and for each other and for the planet with all these different waking and sleeping states. So when we're talking about dreams, we're building those pathways. And there were many cultures, when we look back at, say, like the Aborigines, and they talk about dream time. It wasn't just sleep, dream time. It was going to those higher states where they were enabling themselves to contact their elders, all of the beings that they associated with, so that they could work together and bring it back into this physical domain, into this time frame. And that's what they also considered as working with time travel. So dreams are really a wonderful, wonderful way to understand ourselves and to explore as a pathway for what it is that we choose to create and how we can make our life more loving, more conscious, and more effective.
One of our earlier designs called the Eye Connect, we now have an advanced one, which is wonderful. It's got a lot of energy, more energy going with it. But the earlier Eye Connect, one of the lovely things about that for me was that it was very relaxing. So I even have one in my pillow now. I always do, and I think Gail does as well, because what we found is that it enhances dream time. It enhances the experience. And many people also use the Heart Companion and wear it at night and have very vivid dreams that they remember. And if you do want to work with your dreams, it would be often wise to have a dream journal. So on awakening, right as you awaken in the morning, start to write down memories of your dreams, and that way you will kind of culture that in your body and do it more and more. But still, what I wanted to bring up was relevant to what Gail was just talking about. When I had friends and people that got the early Eye Connect, they found some of them, even though they'd been insomniacs up to that point and had a very difficult time sleeping, that working with the Eye Connect, they could sleep more deeply. For me, when I do wake up in the middle of the night, I used to simply say, I will go back to sleep and awaken when the sun comes up and shines on my face. And for the first time in my life since I was a kid, I would wake up when the sun was shining on my face, which was a delicious feeling to have that kind of depth of sleep. However, many of these people, like particularly this one woman who said she was an insomniac and this helped her overcome it, what she was really excited about was she could program herself more easily into setting up particular questions that she wanted answered at night. And so she would put it out to higher self, put it out to universe. Please, tonight, let's work on, and then she would have dreams where she would work out those issues. Or she would sometimes plant the seed of certain questions she wanted answered, other things she wanted to learn, and even things she wanted to work out that were a problem in her daily life. She would ask for help in resolving them at night. So it's just like I started out talking at the beginning of this conversation with you today about how so much of our life is spent, a third of it at night, and now she was finding she could work through problems. She could work out her life. When she would awaken, it's almost as if some of those issues had been dissolved, or she would very quickly understand. Even if she didn't remember the dream completely, she would understand how to work with that issue in her life and come to a more quick resolution. And it was all using that dream time. And it's really fun when you think about, oh my goodness, I've got all this space. And that's one of the things that I think we often lament is there's so little time and so much to do. Well, here is a time that you can utilize, and not utilize it for worry. Often people are kept awake at night. They don't get really deep rest because they're worrying about things. They're trying to solve their problems. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that kind of difficulty that's running through your head so you can't fully rest. I'm talking about the deep sleep that allows you to go very deeply into your psyche, giving you the rest you need. And as Gail was saying earlier, when you really go to that depth, I think sometimes that's a lot of the reason we sleep, because we need to connect to spirit, and we do not connect to spirit enough in our life. But at night, during those deep times when the ego steps aside, we can more easily be sourced by soul and have soul come in and really nourish the body. And those are the kinds of solutions I'm talking about, that kind of nourishment, where you really feel the joy and the love and the support in your life that comes in when you really connect to soul. And it's in that connection to soul that we really rest. Rest in the arms of God, if you will. Rest in the arms of spirit. Rest in the arms of who we truly are. And then we are just like that little girl I talked about earlier, who's going out traveling, doing things, and when she comes back into her body and it's been left the way it's supposed to by the mother and cared for, it's beautiful what starts to happen.
So join us next time. We're going to talk about meditation and how that is another aspect of exploration with how spirit connects to us. And thank you, and enjoy your day.
Blessings.